Today we're going to have a look at APS-C lenses on full frame cameras, and specifically with active stabilization and dynamic stabilization. And the reason is those stabilization methods incur a crop. These lenses, which are 1.5 crop, actually produce a larger image circle. So maybe we can make them mesh together and they might work out. But there is no guarantee that they will work out. So in this video, I will be trying out 3 lenses. It's going to be this monster, the 18 to 110 GOSS. It is a monster. However, I do have tiny lenses, smaller lenses, like the 70 to 350. This is a somewhat small telephoto, super telephoto type of lens. 70 to 350 is quite a bit of range. And of course, I have a little guy here. It's the PZ10 to 20. If this thing can work as well as the other 10 to 18 and the Sigma 10 to 18, that would be fantastic. I'm not sure. We'll find out. So a full frame lens that can go from 18 to 110 would be incredible. And it's constant f4. But it is a bit of wishful thinking. I will let you know that. If this thing works out, it would be great. Sony does make a 28 to 128. And that lens can probably work out better. The only thing is that it starts at 28. This starts at 18. That's a huge difference. Okay, so stabilization is turned off right now. And as you can see, this thing is wildly insufficient. Okay, so here we are. This is 25. Here is 30. Going to 50. Going to 70. 85. And here's the end at 110. That is quite a bit of range. You can see that at 110, even without dynamic stabilization or active stabilization, it's kind of usable. But around here, it's not. So now we will just turn on active stabilization. This is with active stabilization. It's not quite good enough, and you have to keep it on a tripod. Obviously, you're not going to hand carry this. Now here's dynamic stabilization. If you're on a tripod, it looks to be able to work all the way through, which is really nice. That incurs a 1.3 crop. If you're on a tripod, like I said, you can use this in a pinch all throughout. It's just that if you're doing handheld stuff, I mean, are you really going to do a handheld vlog with this? It is massive. And I can see already that it's vignetting. Yes, the vignetting is getting into the frame. So it wouldn't work out as a handheld vlogging tool. However, if you're just holding it for stable footage, you might be able to get away. And let's just see. If you're holding it and you move around, there's vignetting here. Let's see at 25. Still some vignetting, as you can see. And yeah, it's still there. But moving on, I think it's starting to disappear around 28. Oh no, it's still there a little bit. Here's 35. Yeah, so 35, it would go away, but that decreases the usability of this lens quite a bit. I mean, you're at 35 now. You might as well get the 28 to 135. If you already own this lens, sure, you could use it in a pinch. However, I wouldn't recommend you go looking to buy this lens. Okay, so the next one is going to be the 70 to 300. Let's give it a shot. Alright, so I got stabilization just on standard. There is no crop at this point, and you can see that it's quite usable already. Okay, so this is at 70 millimeters. Let's go to 100. Here's 100. Here is 135. Going further to 200. Yeah, it starts to crop in a little bit, tiny bit. So if you're in active stabilization, you should be fine. Dynamic stabilization, you're definitely good. And here is 300 where it really creeps in. But even at 300, if you're using active stabilization, let's switch it on right now. Here we go, active stabilization. It mostly goes away. But you see when you're moving it, it does crop into the frame a bit. If you want it totally gone, then you'll need dynamic stabilization. Here's dynamic stabilization. You can see that it is good. I mean, this is like the worst possible focal length, 300 millimeters. But with dynamic stabilization, it goes away. There's no crop. You can use this. It's totally usable. Granted, you know, dynamic stabilization isn't going to do any miracles. You can still get smooth shots. It's just that don't move so fast. And then it turns out okay. So the 70 to 300, if you want a long telephoto lens that can work in video with dynamic stabilization, mostly through with active stabilization, without any post-processing, the 70 to 300, it does a good job. It really does. All right, so let's have a look at the 10 to 20 PZ. All right, so I got the 10 to 20 PZ. This is the f4. This is the new Sony lens. And you can see right here, it is wide. At 10 millimeters, there is quite a bit of vignetting. And we're going to zoom in. This is stabilization just on standard, so there's no crop involved. Here's 11 millimeters. Here is, wow, where's 12? There's 12. Moving into 13, 14, 15. Look at 15. This is abnormal. That means that the back of this lens, there's a baffle. There's a good chance that you could just remove that baffle and this vignette goes away. So if you're using active stabilization, consider this. Moving on to 17, 18, 19, and 20. So you can see that that baffle is really getting away. The lens is circular. It shouldn't be producing this square, but that baffle, well, that's causing that square vignette because that's not natural. So let's have a look at active stabilization. Okay, so this is at 10, no movement, on a tripod. You know, 11, it becomes usable already. Well, more 11 and a half, 12. Okay, so 12 really usable. And beyond, let's see where it comes back at 16. It starts to come back already. 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 is definitely there. It's on the edges. You can see it. So it's not the greatest for active stabilization. For dynamic stabilization, this is on a tripod still. We're going down the line and there is no vignette. You see the 15 millimeter, the area where there was trouble before, it doesn't introduce itself. Here's 20 millimeters. However, when it's off the tripod, you can see that 20 millimeters becomes a problem. It starts to produce vignetting. And that's probably the worst part of it. even with that dynamic stabilization. This is at 16 millimeters right here. And let's see. 16 looks good, but it can creep in still. So if you want to use this on this camera and you want to use the entire range or close to the entire range, then you're going to need to remove that baffle. And I'll show you what it looks like in a second. Here is 10 millimeters. And 10 millimeters, you cannot remove the baffle because the element is already all the way back. And it does vignette a little bit. Does it vignette a lot? Yes, it kind of does. But I believe it's less than maybe the Sigma, just by a hair. And it requires a similar approach in that you want no vignetting, you just go to 12 millimeters. And 12 millimeters, I mean, how wide is that? Well, it's going to be this wide. Okay? 12 millimeters. I'm just holding it with my hand. You can see it is quite a bit wide, right? It is wide. So I'm going to test one more thing. I'm going to get a feel to see how stable this is, because this is one of the lenses where you can do like walk and talks, and I haven't tested one of the newer APS-C lenses, see if it's more stable on full frame. It might be, it might not be. So let's give it a shot. So this next section will be filmed at f4 at 12 millimeters, 10 to 20 PZ. And based on my inspection, yes, the Sony factor does work on this lens. It did not work on the 10 to 18 Sony f4, the older one. It does work here, and there is a problem. It vignettes a little bit, and the perfect spot is actually 13 millimeters with active stabilization. The next test is at f4, 12 millimeters dynamic stabilization. And you can see that this thing is buttery smooth. It is incredibly smooth. It almost floats. It works really well. So if you have this mode, do indeed use it. It is still plenty wide. And for kicks, we have the Sony 10 to 20 f4 PZ on the left, active stabilization, and the Sigma 10 to 18 f2.8 on the right, active stabilization. Can you see the Sony factor? Being an ultra wide, it doesn't make a big difference, but it exists. All right, so this may or may not be with the surgery performed, rear baffle removed. It may or may not be. And here's 12 millimeters as expected. It's good. 13, 14, 15. There's a huge difference now. You can see that. At 15, the square crop isn't there anymore. However, you still get the circular crop. This is all the way at 20. Okay, so now we're going to go to active stabilization. And unfortunately, if you use active, you're going to get vignetting. So if you want a safer bet, there is the 10 to 18 f4. There's the Sigma. It works better with active stabilization. And here it's back to 12 and back to 10. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at dynamic stabilization. 10 millimeters. Of course, that doesn't change because the baffle doesn't really cover the 10 millimeters. However, once you start zooming in, it's too slow. Okay, so 12 is expected. It's fine. Even 11 is probably not going to vignette, probably. But let's see what happens to 15. Okay. 15 millimeters. Here we are. F4 15. It would show up right at that edge, but it's not. Okay, so do all the way to 20 because 20 is the worst. Is it gonna show up? Even if I shake it around, looks good. Surgery. I'm not saying I did any surgery on this lens rental lens, but it's looking good. And that's all I got for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to like, subscribe, share. See you in the next one. Take care.